My name is Adam Carter. I'm 34 years old, live in Cincinnati, Ohio, and if you'd asked me a year ago where I saw myself, I would have said holding my newborn son in one arm and my wife's hand in the other. Instead, I'm standing alone in what used to be our nursery, staring at an empty crib like it might give me answers. But it won't, because Hannah, my wife, took our baby and disappeared without a word. It started slowly. You don't notice the cracks in your marriage until you fall through them. Hannah changed after the delivery, but I chalked it up to postpartum stress. She was tired, withdrawn, easily irritated. The sparkle that used to shine in her eyes when I brought her coffee or massaged her swollen feet, gone. She avoided looking at me most days. Or worse, look through me. I didn't push her. I read every article about postpartum mood swings, gave her space, tried to carry the load. I get up at 2 a.m., feed baby Elijah, change his diapers, rock him while she slept. I thought love meant patience. But she didn't just need patience. She needed something else entirely, something I didn't know how to give, and something she never told me she wanted. And then one morning, she was just gone. The door was left open. The bassinet was empty. Her closet was half cleared out. No note, no call, no text. At first, I thought she'd gone to her mom's. But Evelyn, her mother, hadn't heard from her either. Neither had any of her friends. I tried her phone, disconnected. I went to the police after 48 hours. But because there was no sign of struggle, they said she likely left voluntarily. Voluntarily. That word stabbed me in the chest. That meant they weren't going to help. That meant she didn't just go for a walk and forget to come back. She planned this. And she took my son with her. I still went to work. Barely. I stopped eating real meals. I'd fall asleep on the couch and wake up in the middle of the night with Elijah's phantom cries echoing in my head. People started pulling away. My coworkers gave me that awkward pity face. My sister, Julie, offered to stay with me, but I pushed her away. I didn't want witnesses to my unraveling. And in the middle of all this pain, guilt took root. I started asking myself the kind of questions that make you want to punch mirrors. Had I missed signs? Had I failed to protect my son? Was I that unlovable? I used to believe marriage meant forever. That you fought. That you stuck around through the storms. But Hannah? She boarded the lifeboat and left me on the sinking ship. Then, 6 weeks later, I saw her. At the grocery store. No, I wasn't stalking. I wasn't following leads. I'd stopped believing I'd ever see her again. I just needed milk and bread, and God, maybe something stronger. And there she was, wearing new clothes, holding Elijah, laughing, with someone else. A man, tall, clean-cut, wearing a suit like he was on his lunch break from some downtown law firm. He kissed her on the cheek like they were the family. My legs froze. I couldn't breathe. She didn't see me. At least I don't think she did. But I saw enough. And in that moment, something in me died. Not because she'd left me. Because she replaced me. So fast. So clean. I spent the next few days in a haze. I barely slept. I started digging through her social media, but everything had been wiped. Deleted. Erased. Like I was a bad chapter in a book she no longer wanted to read. Eventually, I contacted a lawyer. I told him what happened, that my wife abandoned our home, took our child, and now lives with a man I don't even know. He listened, but his tone was cautious. Do you have proof? He asked. No note. No documentation. No text history. Did she ever say she was unhappy? Did you two argue? No. I muttered, she just left. He gave me that look people give you when they don't believe you, but are too polite to say it. He offered to file a petition for custody, but warned me, without evidence, it would be tough. In the eyes of the court, Hannah wasn't a kidnapper. She was a mother exercising her maternal instinct. The system wasn't built for men like me. 2 weeks later, I got served. Not custody papers, not a restraining order. A divorce filing, filed in her new city, Louisville, Kentucky. And on that paper, it listed her new address. That's when I realized she wasn't coming back. She had built a whole new life, one I was never meant to be part of. But the worst part? The documents claimed I had been emotionally absent, that I refused to support her postpartum, that she had no choice but to flee with the baby to protect his well-being, that she was the victim, and me? I was the villain in her rewritten story. I couldn't let that stand. Not for Elijah. Not for my name. I told myself I wouldn't let emotions get in the way. But rage is a funny thing. It doesn't come in waves, it floods. So I drove to Louisville. I parked outside her apartment. I didn't knock. I just sat in the car, watching. It was 5:45 p.m. when he came home. The guy, the suit. He kissed her at the door like it was a routine. She smiled. She laughed, like I'd never existed. But before I could decide what to do next, a voice tapped on my car window. "Sir." It was a cop. And what he said next chilled me. "Are you Adam Carter?" I nodded. "You've been reported for suspicious activity. I'm going to have to ask you to leave." That was her doing. She knew ID come, and she'd set the trap. And just like that, I was the threat, the father, the husband, now the stalker. That night, I slept in a motel 3 blocks from her place. And I didn't sleep, because now it wasn't just heartbreak. It was war. The next morning, I sat at the edge of a motel bed, staring at the ceiling fans spinning above me, wondering how my life got here. A year ago, I had dreams of father-son fishing trips. Now, I had a police warning, divorce papers, and a motel bill I couldn't afford. But I wasn't ready to roll over and let Hannah bury me. There was something off about all of this. Too fast. Too scripted. Her disappearance. The way she rewrote our story in legal filings, the guy she was with, like she'd rehearsed it all in advance. Something inside me clicked. She didn't just fall in love with someone else. She planned this. I went home to Cincinnati. I needed help, even if it hurt to ask. Julie, my younger sister, showed up the second I called. She brought soup, sat on my couch, and said nothing for 15 minutes, just waited while I fell apart in front of her. Then she said something I'll never forget. "You're not crazy, and I believe you." She suggested I hire a private investigator. At first, I hesitated. That sounded like something from a TV show, not real life. But she reminded me, Hannah had rewritten everything, and if I wanted to stand a chance in court, I needed facts. Proof. Patterns. So I found a PI named Marcus Klein. Ex-military. Quiet. Sharp eyes. Didn't talk much, but he listened. I gave him everything I knew, where Hannah was living, her new boyfriend, even old texts and emails. He nodded once and said, "Give me a week." That week felt like a month. I worked during the day and barely functioned. At night, I lay awake wondering if Elijah was okay. Was he eating? Sleeping? Did he cry for me? Did he remember my voice? It was a special kind of torture, being erased from your own child's life. On Friday, Marcus called me. "Got something. You free?" I met him at a diner off the highway. He slid a manila folder across the table like he was handing me classified documents. Her boyfriend, his name is Nathan Loring, works for a corporate law firm. Divorced 3 years ago. No kids. Real clean record. I opened the folder. Photos. Timelines. Receipts. Then Marcus lowered his voice. But here's the kicker. I ran background on Hannah too. Not just the basics. Deep dive. You were never her only plan, Adam. He handed me another set of papers. I stared at them, confused. Credit card statements. In her maiden name. A separate bank account. Opened 5 months before Elijah was born. My throat tightened. She was preparing to leave, I said aloud. She was preparing a new life. Marcus corrected. Over the next few days, I went through every record. I found purchases I couldn't explain, baby supplies delivered to a second address, a car rental I never knew about, overnight hotel bookings while I was at work. This wasn't a woman who broke under pressure. This was a woman who strategized. And I knew Hannah well enough to guess why. She wanted control. She always did. And if she couldn't control our marriage, she'd control the narrative. I wasn't just the guy she left behind. I was the one she blamed. Court date came faster than I expected. Family court in Jefferson County. I sat in that courtroom, watching Hannah sit across from me like we were strangers. She wore soft blue, her hair curled perfectly. Nathan was there too, sitting a row behind her, like a shadow she invited. She didn't look at me once. But when the judge asked for statements, she stood up and delivered a monologue worthy of an Oscar. She said I'd grown cold after the birth, that I didn't support her, that I refused to bond with Elijah, that I didn't care when she cried herself to sleep. I gripped the table so hard my knuckles went white, because she made it sound true. And the worst part? There's no evidence to disprove an emotion. When it was my turn, I told the truth. Calmly, carefully, I told the judge about the disappearance, about waking up to an empty house, about being served papers from another state, blindsided by false claims. I mentioned nothing about Nathan, not yet, but even as I spoke, I could tell. The judge was leaning toward her. She was the mother. She had the baby. She had the optics. And I had a folder of photos that couldn't speak. After court, I sat in my car for over an hour, just staring at the steering wheel. I didn't cry. I didn't punch anything. I just sat. Hello. Then I got a text from Marcus. You're going to want to see this. Sending footage. I opened the file. It was security camera footage. A woman dropping off Elijah at a daycare. But it wasn't Hannah. It was Nathan, and daycare forms listed him as father. I blinked hard. He was claiming my son, without adoption papers, without legal rights, without my consent. I printed the footage and sent it to my attorney. His response, this could change everything. We filed a motion. Accusations of misrepresentation, possible fraud, custody interference. The next court date was set for 4 weeks out, for long weeks. But something changed in me after that. I wasn't just fighting to prove my worth. I was fighting to protect my son. Then something else happened. Julie forwarded me a social media post. A photo of Hannah at a rooftop event. Elijah in her arms, smiling. Nathan's hand on her waist. The caption read, "Thankful for a second chance at family. Couldn't do this without you, Nathan." My stomach dropped. Not because of the words. Because of the location tag. It wasn't Louisville. It was Chicago. She had moved again, without notifying the court, without informing me, without updating custody records. That was a violation. And this time, it might finally be enough. I packed my bag and booked a flight. Because now, she wasn't just playing dirty. She was breaking the law. But what I didn't know yet, what I couldn't know, is that the trip to Chicago wouldn't just change my legal position. It would change everything. Because in Chicago, I would learn a truth that shattered everything I thought I knew about Hannah. I landed in Chicago with nothing but a duffel bag, a folder full of court documents, and a pulse that wouldn't slow down. My attorney had already filed an emergency motion citing parental alienation and custodial violation. But paperwork meant nothing if I didn't find proof of where she was, how she got there, and what she was hiding. Marcus was already waiting at the airport. The guy never slept. She moved in with him last month. Upscale condo near the lake, he said, driving us toward the address. But I found something you need to see. We pulled into a parking lot near Grant Park. He opened his laptop and played me a video clip from a courthouse hearing. Not ours. It was dated 2 years ago. It showed Hannah, crying on a witness stand, speaking into a microphone. I was manipulated, lied to. I didn't know he was married. I blinked. What is this? Marcus paused the video. That's her, on the stand, in a civil case. She wasn't just a witness. She was a plaintiff. He explained, before me, before Elijah, Hannah was involved with a man who turned out to be married. When the affair came to light, the wife sued both of them for emotional distress and financial misconduct. Apparently, he'd been funneling joint funds to Hannah. She testified she'd been lied to, painted herself as a victim. The judge dismissed the case. Lack of evidence. But this wasn't publicized? I asked. Buried, Marcus replied. She requested court sealing. New name on social media. She's good at this. The words hit me like a hammer. She's done this before. Later that evening, I stood across the street from her condo building, blending in with a crowd of commuters. I didn't know what I was expecting. Closure? Justice? An apology? What I saw was worse. She exited the building wearing designer boots and holding Elijah like a handbag. Nathan walked beside her, laughing. They looked like a magazine ad, perfect, polished, detached from the trail of destruction behind them. I followed, not too close, just enough to see where she went. A private daycare. Expensive. Elite. Marcus had pulled records. She listed Nathan as emergency contact and father. But not me. Not once. That night, I sat alone in the hotel room with my phone in hand, staring at Elijah's baby photos. His first smile. His tiny hand gripping my finger. I hadn't seen him in months. My own son was becoming a stranger. My fingers trembled as I dialed Hannah's number. She answered. A moment of silence. Then her voice. Adam, you moved again, I said flatly. Didn't tell the court. Didn't tell me. A pause. You don't get to play righteous. Not after the way you made me feel. I closed my eyes. Stop rewriting history. I had no choice, she snapped. You weren't there. You checked out. You didn't give me a chance. I had to go, she hissed. I needed a clean break. For me. For Elijah. I swallowed hard. Is Nathan his father now? Silence. Then, he's more of one than you ever were. That cut deeper than I expected. Good, I whispered. Because I'll see you in court. And this time, I'm bringing everything. I hung up. My hand was shaking. But I wasn't angry. I was done being fooled. 3 days later, we returned to court in Chicago. This time, I had proof of custodial interference. Proof she'd relocated without court approval. Proof of manipulated documents. And I had something else. A character witness. Marcus had tracked down someone unexpected. Lisa Hamilton, the former wife of the man Hannah had been involved with 2 years earlier. She testified via Zoom. I don't know what she's told the court now, Lisa said, but I watched her do the same thing to me. She acts like a victim, but she plans everything. She knows the law. She uses emotions to manipulate the truth. The courtroom was dead silent. Even Hannah looked rattled. My attorney stood. Your Honor, this isn't just about parental rights anymore. This is a pattern, a manipulation of the system. My client isn't asking to take the child away. He's asking for equal rights. The judge nodded slowly, then turned to Hannah. Why did you move without notice? I feared for my safety, she replied quickly. Too quickly. Do you have any police reports? Restraining orders? Any history of abuse? She hesitated. No. Then your justification doesn't hold. This court takes relocation violations seriously. My heart began to race. Was this it? Was the tide finally turning? Later that day, the judge issued a temporary modification. I was granted supervised visitation twice a week. Hannah was ordered to remain in Chicago until the next hearing. And Nathan? Nathan was barred from attending future drop-offs. It was a start, but it didn't feel like a win. Because when I saw Elijah for the first time in nearly 4 months, he didn't recognize me. He looked at me like a stranger. And Hannah, she smiled from across the room, like she'd won something. That night, I sat with Julie on a video call, explaining everything. I don't get it, I muttered. How could she lie like this? In front of judges. In front of people. Doesn't it eat at her? Julie stared at me for a long time, then said, Adam, maybe it already does. Maybe that's why she keeps running. People like that don't stop. They don't heal. They just rebuild somewhere else. The thought chilled me. Because if that was true, then I wasn't fighting a woman. I was fighting a storm. The next week, Marcus sent me one final file. He said it was risky, hard to obtain. It was a psychological evaluation from Hannah's sealed civil case 2 years ago. I read every page. She'd been evaluated for emotional regulation, empathy response, and pattern behaviors. One line burned into my mind. Subject demonstrates strong narrative adaptation skills. Easily reframes events to cast herself in favorable light, often distorting facts unconsciously. Shows signs of unresolved trauma tied to past abandonment, but lacks insight into self-sabotaging behaviors. I sat for an hour rereading it, because it finally made sense. She didn't leave because I failed her. She left because she didn't know how to stay. But that didn't mean I would give up. Because Elijah deserved stability. He deserved truth. And for the first time since she walked out, I felt something like clarity. Like maybe, just maybe I could turn this around. But then came a knock at my hotel door. And behind it, a letter from Hannah's lawyer. Inside was a new request. Full custody. She was going to try and erase me again. Only this time, she was going to do it publicly. The letter sat on the nightstand for 3 days before I touched it again. Full custody. That was her next move. No mediation. No compromise. Just erasure. Hannah wanted to wipe me from Elijah's life like chalk on a sidewalk. Like I was a mistake she couldn't wait to scrub out. She had filed a formal petition to the court, accusing me of emotional instability and paranoia. She claimed that visitation was disruptive and that Elijah cried for hours after each supervised meeting. She painted me like a toxic ghost from a past she'd survived. I felt like I was sinking in wet cement. Every time I clawed my way out, she added more weight. But this time, I wasn't alone. Julie flew into Chicago the night before the hearing. She didn't ask for permission. She just showed up at my hotel door with 2 coffees and a fire in her eyes. "You're not going down like this," she said. "Not without your side being told." She sat with me while I reviewed every document, every timeline. Marcus joined us and laid out a strategy. And we didn't just have emotion now. We had evidence, history, and a pattern. Most importantly, we had a witness. One Hannah would never expect. The courtroom was packed that morning. I don't know who all the people were. Neighbors? Court staff? Strangers waiting for their own hearings? It didn't matter. Because when Hannah walked in, wearing her soft cream blazer and holding a thin folder, she looked confident. Cold. Like this was a business meeting she was destined to win. Nathan sat behind her again, still silent, still pretending he wasn't the catalyst for all of this. My lawyer stood first. "Your Honor, we oppose the motion for full custody, and we'd like to introduce a rebuttal witness." The judge nodded. "Proceed." The door opened, and in walked Evelyn, Hannah's mother. I hadn't spoken to Evelyn in months, not since the disappearance. I thought she'd taken Hannah's side. Maybe she had at first, but Marcus had reached out, quietly, and when he told her what Hannah had done, what she was doing, Evelyn didn't hesitate. She walked to the stand slowly, shoulders square, eyes tired. My attorney asked, "Can you describe the time leading up to your daughter's departure with Elijah?" Evelyn nodded. "Yes. Hannah stayed with me for 2 days before she left town. She said she needed space. I thought it was temporary until I realized she wasn't just hiding. She was rewriting everything. Did she express fear of her husband? No, never. She said Adam was dull, predictable, boring even, but never dangerous." That word boring stung more than I expected. But Evelyn continued. She said she couldn't take the routine, that being a mother felt like a trap, that she missed feeling desired, important. I begged her to slow down, to think, but she was already gone in her mind. Hannah's face hardened. Her fingers gripped the table, but she didn't interrupt. She told me, Evelyn said softly, that if she didn't leave soon, she'd wake up 10 years later wondering why she was still married to a man who didn't make her heart race. That silence in the courtroom was suffocating. Then my lawyer dropped the hammer. "Your Honor, we're not here to shame anyone, but we are here to show motive. This isn't a case about child safety. It's about control, about punishing a man for not being the fantasy she wanted. After the vows, after the child, after the reality set in." The judge turned to Hannah. "Do you have a rebuttal?" She stood up. Her voice was icy. "I had to do what was best for Elijah." "And was disappearing for 3 months best for him?" the judge asked. "Listing another man as his father? Moving cities without disclosure?" She opened her mouth, but nothing came out. For once, she didn't have a prepared line. Later, I sat outside the courthouse, waiting for the ruling. My hand shook, not from fear, but exhaustion. It felt like this battle had aged me a decade. Hannah walked out 10 minutes later. Alone. She didn't look at me, but she stopped. Not to apologize. To speak. "I loved you, Adam." I did. I didn't reply, but I couldn't breathe anymore. "You loved me in a way that felt like prison." I turned to her slowly. "That wasn't prison, Hannah. That was real life. Bills, diapers, sleepless nights. Love isn't fireworks every day. Sometimes it's just staying. And you couldn't." She blinked fast, then said something that chilled me. "You're going to win, and I'll smile in court. But don't ever think I'll stop rebuilding. I'll always find a way to feel alive." Then she walked away, and I finally understood. She didn't hate me. She just hated stillness. That evening, the court issued a partial ruling. Shared custody, equal parenting rights, a neutral third-party mediator assigned. No more Nathan listed on any documents. It wasn't a full win, but it was the first time I'd felt seen in months. Elijah was mine again, even if it would take time to rebuild what was lost. That weekend, during our first unsupervised visit, Elijah fell asleep on my chest. I cried quietly into his hair, whispering promises he couldn't yet understand. "I'm here, buddy. I'm not going anywhere." But redemption isn't a clean road. And just when I thought the battle was ending, I got an email from an unknown sender. Subject line, You don't know what Hannah's hiding. Inside was one sentence. Check her time in Arizona, 2019. You want the hospital records. And attached? A photo of Hannah, in a hospital gown, holding a different baby. The photo haunted me. Hannah in a hospital gown. No makeup, raw and real, but smiling, beaming, actually holding a newborn. Not Elijah. This child was clearly older than our son. At least a year or more older. The timestamp said November 2019. Tucson, Arizona. Elijah was born in June 2022. So who was the baby in that photo? And why had she never told me? I stared at that email for hours. The sender's address was a string of random characters. No name, no signature, just the message and the photo. At first, I told myself it was fake. Old, maybe from a friend's baby. But I knew that face. I knew the way she cradled the baby. That wasn't a borrowed child. That was hers. Which meant she'd been pregnant before Elijah. Before me. And never said a word. I called Marcus. Forwarded the email. I need everything from her time in Arizona. Travel history. Hospital admissions. Anything under her name or aliases. He was quiet for a beat. Then said, "Give me 48 hours. I didn't sleep much after that. I kept remembering all the times Hannah said she wanted to be a mother. How she described Elijah as her first real purpose. But it wasn't true. She had another child. Why lie about that? What happened to that baby? Marcus came through like he always did. She had spent 4 months in Tucson in late 2019. Rented a short-term apartment. Visited a prenatal clinic 3 times. Gave birth at a private maternity hospital. Then, nothing. No death certificate. No adoption records. No court filings. It was like the child had vanished into thin air. Marcus handed me a second folder. But then I found this. A notarized document. Sealed, but somehow still accessible through a clerical mistake. It was a private open adoption agreement. Hannah had given up the baby to a couple in Flagstaff, Arizona. The child's name was Liam. No father was listed. The terms were strict. No contact unless initiated by the adoptive parents. No visitation. No follow-ups. Hannah had waived her parental rights. I sat alone for a long time after reading that. She had given up her first child, then built a new life with me, never mentioning him, never once whispering that she'd been a mother before, not even when Elijah was born. Not during the nights she held him, whispered lullabies, and talked about how much he'd changed her. Had it been guilt? Or was just another rewrite? The next time I saw Hannah, it was during a court-mandated co-parenting session. Neutral ground. Monitored environment. The room was beige, soulless, with a plastic box of toys in the corner and 2 chairs too far apart to feel like family. She walked in late. Sat down, barely looked at me. I waited. Then quietly, I slid the photo across the table. Her hand froze. She stared at it, then looked at me. "You went through my past?" she whispered. "You lied about your past." Her eyes flicked to the mediator, who was pretending not to listen, but absolutely was. "You don't understand," she muttered. "Then help me." For the first time in months, she looked at me like a human being. Later that day, after the session, she texted me. "Meet me. Alone. 7 p.m. Wabash Bridge." I hesitated. Julie told me not to go. Marcus said it could be a trap, but I went anyway. She was already there, standing against the rail as the wind tangled her hair. The river below looked black and endless. "I never wanted to lie," she began. "But I didn't think you'd stay if you knew." "Knew what?" "That I ran," she said. "Back then, too. I met someone older. He was kind at first. Then he wasn't. He left when I got pregnant. His family blamed me. I gave birth alone in a city I didn't know. I didn't have anything. No job. No degree. Just a baby I couldn't feed." She looked up, tears in her eyes, but no sobbing. Just truth. "I gave him up, and I buried the whole year. Started fresh. And then I met you. And you made me feel like I could finally be good. So why leave again?" Her face broke. "Because I didn't believe it would last. Because you started to see the real me. The one who runs, who breaks things, who hides." "And Elijah?" I asked. "What happens when he asks one day if he had a brother?" She turned away, staring down at the water. "I don't know." The next court hearing was silent compared to the last. No shouting. No drama. Just truth laid bare in quiet depositions. My lawyer didn't use the adoption against her. We didn't bring up Liam in court. I couldn't do that to her or to the child who'd been given a new life. But I knew the truth now, and she knew I knew, and something changed between us. We still weren't us again, but there was a strange kind of honesty now. A beginning. Maybe not for us, but for Elijah's sake. Weeks passed, then a month. The custody schedule stabilized. Elijah started smiling when he saw me. I began building routines. Pancakes, park walks, bedtime stories. I stopped checking Hannah's social media. Stopped watching her condo from my car. Stopped needing her to explain everything. But then one night, I got a knock on the door. It was Hannah. She was crying. I saw him, she whispered. Ooh, Liam. The adoptive parents sent me a photo. He's 5 now. Blonde. He looks like me. She reached into her coat and handed me a picture. And for the first time, she didn't cry because she felt cornered. She cried because she felt everything. We sat on my porch for a long time, saying nothing. 2 parents. 2 people who broke each other, trying to hold what was left. But Hannah's past wasn't done with her yet, because 3 weeks later, we got news that changed everything. Nathan, he filed for paternal rights over Elijah. Claimed Hannah had told him he might be the father, and he wanted a paternity test. The moment I read the court notice, I felt my stomach twist into a knot. Nathan Loring, petitioner. Request. Establishment of paternity. Minor involved, Elijah Carter. The document was clean, cold, clinical, but the meaning underneath it? Poison. I stared at it for hours. Ran through the dates in my head, counted backward. There was no way Elijah wasn't mine. No way. Hannah and I were still sleeping in the same bed when she got pregnant. We were trying. We wanted him. But I remembered how quickly she moved on, how fast she ended things, how prepared she seemed to be for a new life. I didn't want to ask the question, but now I had no choice. I called my attorney. He was calm, but cautious. These motions are rare, but not unheard of. It doesn't mean he is the father. It just means he believes, or claims. He has reason to find out. And if I couldn't say the rest, he understood anyway. If the test comes back in his favor, he can petition for custody or visitation rights. Maybe more. It felt like someone had cracked open my chest and poured fire inside. Elijah wasn't just my son. He was my anchor. The reason I didn't lose myself completely after Hannah left. And now, someone else wanted to cut that rope. I confronted Hannah the next day. Not at court. Not in some office. Just us, at a public park where Elijah was playing in the grass. Her face paled when I mentioned Nathan's filing. I didn't know he'd do this, she said, eyes wide. But you didn't deny it. She looked down. There was overlap, she whispered. It was only once. Before we broke up, I didn't think it mattered. I stepped back like her words hit me physically. I deserve to know. I know, she said quietly, but I was afraid you'd leave, that you wouldn't love him the same. That broke me. You think biology changes how I feel about him? Her silence said she did. The test was scheduled a week later. Swab in my mouth. Swab in Elijah's. We told him it was a doctor's visit. He giggled through the whole thing. He didn't know that his whole world might shift depending on a lab result. The days that followed were a blur. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep, couldn't look at old photos without wondering, is he mine? Really mine? Julie tried to reassure me. He feels like your son. That's what matters. But I needed more than feelings. I needed truth. The results came on a rainy Thursday. I sat in my car outside the courthouse, hands shaking, heart thudding so loud I couldn't hear anything else. I opened the envelope. Read the words. And broke into sobs I couldn't control. Paternity result. 99.98% match. Biological father, Adam Carter. I laughed and cried at the same time, soaking the paper with tears. Relief crashed over me like a wave. Elijah was mine, not just in my heart, in every cell, every strand of DNA. He was my son, not Nathan's, not anyone else's. Hannah called me that night. I'm sorry, she said, voice thin and cracked. I thought I was doing what was right, but I ruined everything. For once, I didn't yell. I'm tired, Hannah, I said. I've spent months fighting to be in my own child's life. You treated me like a placeholder, like a thing to discard. And through all of it, I never stopped loving Elijah. Silence. Then she whispered, I don't know how to fix it. You don't, I said. But maybe you can start by letting go. 3 months passed. The custody agreement held steady. We stopped fighting. We stopped hurting each other in courtrooms. Hannah went to therapy. I did too. Separate, but healing in our own ways. One day, she asked if I could take Elijah for the weekend. Not because of court, but because she wanted to visit Arizona. To see Liam. I didn't stop her. Didn't even ask questions. Maybe that was the beginning of forgiveness. On Elijah's 4th birthday, we had a joint party. Small. Quiet. Just a few family members. Nathan wasn't there. Julie baked the cake. I grilled burgers. Hannah helped with the balloons. At one point, I looked over and saw her watching me. Not like she used to. Not with resentment or sadness. But something close to gratitude. I was wrong about you, she said. You were scared, I replied. So was I. She nodded. I think I needed to fall apart, and you needed to rise. That night, after everyone left, Elijah crawled into my lap and fell asleep. His breath was soft. His fingers curled around mine. And I realized I had finally come through the storm. Not untouched, not unchanged, but still standing, still here. Epilogue. 2 years later. Elijah started school last fall. I packed his lunch every morning and walked him to the bus. He always waved 3 times, never 2, never 4. Hannah and I will never be what we once were. But we're something new. We're parents. And sometimes that's more powerful than love. Sometimes that's the redemption. Not fixing what was broken, but building something honest on top of the ruins.